Go to CU and be in the marching band or go to Vietnam. Easy choice. And the first band that I was actually out there like gigging was the Soul Set, an all-white soul band from Boulder. And we were terrible. We knew we were terrible. The crowd knew we were terrible. And everybody dug it. If you just wander into a bar and you hear a band that's really good, you're going to sit there and go, I could never be that good in 2 lifetimes. Let's go. You see, but if it's just mediocre, I could do as good as that. Come on, Mabel, let's have another pitcher and drink. I graduated from CU finally in December of '70, and the war was still going on. So I went to New York to study with the Steve Getz Band. And then at the end of '71, it was the kind of thing where the draft board was calling again. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel. So I came back to deal with local board number 13 in Inglewood. And at that point, I had that my tortilla tusk, my little side beard. Yeah. It's in a shoebox. I should pull it out and show it to you. I still have it, and with no gray hairs in it. Someday I'll glue it back on, maybe here or on the other side. But anyway, in 1970, I was still at CU, and there was a black guy that walked into the student union, the UMC, and he had one right here. And I just flipped. I went, that's for me. I got to have one. But it was too symmetrical, so I put mine over here, you know. And it was the kind of thing where whew, it was really weird. You know, it was really out there. You know, everybody else had the hippie thing with the hair and the clothes, but you know, nobody knew what to make of that, you know.
The Fly in the Zippers. Fly is the acclaimed horn player, and for me, 25 years bass clarinet service.
'73 is when the Zippers started. There was Mark McMillan on keys and sang. He was actually, if anybody was a leader, he was. Rick Steffens on bass, Don Cameron, Brian Brown on drums, and Dennis Hooten, alias Elmo the Hammer, was the other saxophone guy. So we were strictly, you know, we were actually a fusion band before fusion had a word. We had a rhythm section that would go boom, da-da-whack, da-da-boom, da-da-whack, da-da-boom, da-da-whack, all night long, and then we would put as much jazz as we could get on top of it. You know, and it was novel at the time. You know, everybody was going, cool, man, what's that? Oh, no.
I've seen him stumble up from the bar at the Outback to play with Pandemonium on a Sunday night. I've always felt that Fly embodied kind of the love of music that existed in Boulder. A guy who, there were no barriers. You know, there were no barriers. He played anything. You know, he wanted to have that horn in his mouth, and he wanted to be playing, and it could be jazz, it could be rock, it could be big band, it could be country and western, it didn't matter. He was the fly on the wall with every music in town.
Of all things, the Dusters asked me to play. And I'm going, you really want a saxophone player with a country band? They said, yes. And they played me all these old Bob Wills and these Texas Playboy records. And they said, we want to do this country swing thing, and it's got a history of horns. And I went, cool, because it was right next door to bebop and swing. So there I was playing country and western for several years.
Stardate 35.9. Captain's log supplementary. Delayed report. While myself, Mr. Spock, and the landing party were beaming down to the planet's surface, there was some sort of malfunction in the transporter. And suddenly, we found ourselves on a Type M planet, not unlike Earth, in what looks to be a country and western band.
Even though they weren't in the room, I have visions of lassos and lassoing in that girl watching a Dusty Drapes show. Man, no better than that. This is the greatest white hat act in the history of music, okay? Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, Ray Benson, keep him. He doesn't need to say howdy partner or anything like that. He is howdy partner.
Thank you. You know, I like to come see Dusty Drapes make records. And I was so blown away, kind of, when that steel player ripped that solo.
Well, the thing with the Dusters you got to remember is these were a bunch of hippies that cut their hair and put on cowboy clothes and were playing these country songs as a goof. You see, and everybody in Boulder got the joke. Oh, it's a bunch of hippies playing country. Cool. When we went to LA in '75, they didn't get the joke. They thought, are you guys for real or what? What are you doing? And we toured Canada, Texas, got the record deal with Columbia, we spent $50,000 of their money recording a record, and then after that, it was also the same time Columbia had signed Asleep at the Wheel. They went, we don't need 2 of these, so who does, yeah. That was the end of the Dusters.
There was a kid in Yuma, Colorado, and that's Michael Woody. Down the block from him in Yuma is a guy named Robert Anderson, and these two start writing songs together, and they come to Boulder.
The whole Boulder experience eclipsed my studying. I came to Boulder as a straight A student, you know, and I quickly reversed that trend. In 1968, as a freshman, Jock Bartley and I were in the same dormitory, Nichols Hall. Chris Moe from Flash Cadillac, keyboard player. We were all freshmen at University of Colorado, sitting in the same wing of the dorm. And I used to go to the Tulagis all the time to see music there. Drop a little acid and go to Tulagis and drink a couple of pitchers of beer. And I'd gotten into school and realized that I didn't want to be a music teacher. Actually, Rick Nelson and the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly were my earliest, strongest influences. And once the Beatles came out, I realized, hey, you know, I got to be one of these guys. And then the Flying Burrito Brothers. Those 2 records, the first Flying Burrito Brothers, Gilded Palace of Sin, and Sweetheart of the Rodeo, were the turning point in my musical career. I knew that that country music was what I wanted to do.
Now Woody forms Woody and the Peckers.
But for some reason, you know, it kind of was like, that's pretty catchy, you know, we like that. And we had the denim shirt, snap button denim shirt look, you know, the cowboys and the cowboy boots and stuff. We did a lot of originals, and we did a lot of Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson right at the early point of the outlaw era, and of course we did a lot of Graham Parsons. I'd kind of needed to change musically. The Peckers were together, I think 3 or 4 years, something like that.
And then it evolves into Woody and the aptly named Too High Band.
Well, that happened because we didn't really have a name, and Tim was amazed at how much we drank. You know, one time he says, you guys are too high, you know? And we said, hey, we're the Too High Band. We used to go to bars, and the bartenders would go, nobody drinks as much as you guys except Dusty Drapes and the Dusters. And so then it became like, okay, who drinks more, the Too High Band or Dusty Drapes and the Dusters? So we had the kind of a competition at that time, you know. I probably would have to concede that, in retrospect, that Dusty they probably had us by an edge, you know, just by a hair, by a nose.
They were the kings of Boulder. I don't care who you talk to, from 76 to 81 or 2. There was no better draw. Way out, at that time, way out, to 55th and Arapahoe, to the Hungry Farmer, and the guitar legend in the making, Randy Barker, just would dig huge, incredible, psychological holes during a country rock guitar lead break, and then brilliantly work his way out of them.
Well, we got very attached to the idea of a major label deal. We had a lot of interest from Electrosylum Records. We also had a lot of interest from Jim Gershio, a fellow I knew at Rocky Mountain Records and Tapes. I gave Michael Nesmith a copy of our tape, of the stuff we did with Jim Mason. And he called our manager and said, I'm in my car driving from Santa Cruz to San Francisco listening to the Too High Band, and I love it. And I want to produce these guys and put them on my Pacific Arts label. We had gotten very attached to the idea of this interest in Electra Asylum and all this stuff, you know. We basically turned him down. And Cactus and I, we run into, every time we get together anymore, we go, boy, you know, we were really stupid. And I said, well, yeah, we were really drunk and stupid. And he said, you know, we look back and we go, oh yeah, he was the first one that had out videos. We could have been on the cutting edge of videos. We would have had videos. We'd have owned our own masters, you know. We'd be leasing it to Rhino Records now, you know. I look back and go, you know, if I would have got the big record advance, made all that money, I would have blown it anyway on cocaine and probably killed myself, you know. So after a few years of sobering up, I moved to Nashville to become a songwriter. And
fast forward to 1987, and Michael Woody and Robert Anderson from Yuma, Colorado, and later Boulder, wrote the #1 hit for Chris Hillman and Desert Rose Band, He's Back and I'm Blue.
Diane played with the girls, and then she showed up in Nashville. We were engaged within 3 weeks and married within 2 months. Within a year, we realized we had a great musical blend and began singing together, and that became the Woodies, you know.
Great anchors, just psychically, of the Boulder music scene, from his days with Magic Music, kind of this hippified, fluty type music, but then worked its way into Spoons, which was a little more of a tight rock and roll aggregation. Big points for being a band leader.
Long story short, I got sort of thrown out of my family's house and disowned. Went down to New York City and played with Buster Poindexter for a couple of months. Back when he really wanted to be Mick Jagger. And then I went out to San Francisco for a while. Finally got to Boulder full-time about 1971. The first band that I played with here was Rosewood Canyon. Dan Moose was really the head of it, and they hired me as their lead guitar player. It was very similar to Magic Music. Magic Music had a real pentangle feel to it, whereas Rosewood Canyon felt much more like a lot of their rhythms and their sounds were like Crosby, Stills and Nash. But the instrumentation were very similar. They were sort of sister bands. Spoons was really a girl harmony band, where the two girls were in front and I was basically singing harmony. I'd sing 1 or 2 songs in the beginning.
Well, I used to go see him. The guy who stood out was a guy named Sam Broussard. Now, Sam, I think, you know, the name Broussard might be part of that Louisiana connection. Sam was the kind of guitarist who could do like the Skunk Baxter stuff in a Steely Dan song, or Lowell George type stuff.
Broussard went to Nashville and then has now gone back to Louisiana and is playing with what he and Steve Conn's roots were. He and Steve were old buddies from Lafayette, Louisiana, as was Sonny Landreth. When Magic Music was living in Allens Park, and Sonny was living right across the valley. And so Sonny Landreth was part of the original Boulder music scene. That's how Steve Conn came up here. My success in any music really has to do with Fred Shellman. Started doing Tellurides with Newgrass Revival as my backup band, you know, which really just doesn't suck, you know. And that's how Michael Barnett heard about us and hired me for Russell Smith. Andy Peake sat down one night and he said, you know, you really ought to do a rhythm and blues band. I said, okay, sure.
Ultimately formed Chris Daniels and the Kings in about 1983, 5.
We borrowed the Gree horns one night, which was Steve Owens, Forrest Means, and Fly McLard. And we did it for one night at the Blue Note. And Craig Rash was mixing sound, and people just went nuts for it.
They continue to play. Now they're on board with this swing thing.
And there were wonderful, wacky things. And Duffy had those great songs, Gonna Have a Wham Bam at the Ashram. These psychic powers are great. These psychic powers are great. I can even levitate a ham sandwich off my plate. You'll sit up and take notice when you see Bo Diddley in a full lotus. You know, I mean, just incredibly creative stuff.
Had bands while I was an art student. In Rhode Island, 66 to 70, was on a visual bent with the rock and roll from the beginning. So stage event was part of it from the go. So I'd present people with power lawnmowers in the museum, but also with the drummer. After Kent State, and we finished our degrees, I drove out to Boulder. And I came out strong on improv, lost on James Brown, and then finally I could write my own stuff.
Jabo got new glasses, y'all.
and I put it in a pocket, and I got a new